I'm Natasha Chilingerian with the Credit Union Times. I am the writer of the monthly Gen Y column. It's called Gen Y BackTalk, and I'm also a correspondent for the Credit Union Times. I've been with the publication for about a year now. I'm a journalist by trade, so I don't have any formal financial training. I've never actually worked for a financial institution before. Over this past year, I've had the chance to talk with many experts and review quite a bit of literature on how credit unions can boost their young membership, how they can convince people between the ages of 18 and 32 to become members. About 5 years ago, I was working a temp job as a web content writer, and for one of my assignments, I had to look up the definition of a credit union. And that's when I really learned what the difference was between a credit union and a bank. But there are a lot of young people out there who still don't know what a credit union is. There are a lot of young people who really don't put much thought into choosing their financial institution. I remember when I sat down to write my first Gen Y column, I asked a friend of mine who's around my age, who's 29, and she belonged to a credit union, and I asked her why she joined. And she said, well, because my parents had accounts there. So she became a member because someone she highly trusted was a member, not because she went out and researched the credit union on her own. But it's imperative that young adults don't just join credit unions because their parents did. You know, there needs to be messages out there that will reach the children of lifelong bank customers, messages out there that will teach young people what the credit union difference is. And that's important because, well, right now, the average age of a credit union member is 47. Obviously, those 47-year-olds aren't going to be around forever. So attracting Gen Y is something that's really critical to your survival in the future. Before I get into some specific suggestions on how credit unions can win over Gen Y, I wanted to talk a little bit about who Gen Y is and some of the stereotypes about Gen Y, both cultural stereotypes and stereotypes that directly relate to their finances and their spending habits. There's actually a lot of confusion out there as to what the age cutoffs are for Gen Y. People have said Gen Y members can be as old as 36 or even as young as 12. But to kind of average out all of these opinions about age cutoffs, and also since we're talking about consumers that are old enough to be receptive to financial product marketing, I like to think of Gen Y as those between the ages of 18 and 32. A lot of different names that are thrown out there to describe Gen Y. One of them is the millennial generation, or the millennials, and that of course refers to coming of age around the year 2000. There's also Generation Next. There's also the Net generation, that of course refers to the internet age. And then there's also the Echo Boomers, and that refers to the fact that most of them are children of baby boomers. But keep in mind that all of these names, they all refer to the same generation. They all refer to the generation that follows Generation X. Another thing to keep in mind is that there are between 80 and 95 million Gen Y members in the US today, and that makes them bigger than any generation that came before them. So it's safe to say that their influence is pretty big. There are a lot of stereotypes out there of Gen Y that are not so good, but it's important to know about them in order to understand them fully. One of them is that they are narcissistic, that they're self-important, self-obsessed, that they think the world revolves around them. Another one is that they're entitled, that they think they deserve rewards without having to work too hard for them, and that they have very high expectations and can be unsatisfied easily. Another stereotype is that they're shallow, that they're obsessed with their looks or trends or brand names or having the latest, trendiest cell phone. They're also associated with the labels trophy kids and Peter Pan generation, which I find to be particularly interesting and somewhat relatable. Trophy kids refers to the fact that when Gen Y kids participated in competitive sports or some other competitive activity, they would all receive a trophy or a ribbon just for participating. Now, I guess the idea there was not to make anyone feel left out or be labeled as the loser, but some would argue that that doesn't teach kids how to take rejection or criticism. And then the label Peter Pan generation, well, that refers to the fact that Gen Y doesn't want to grow up or is slow to grow up. You know, a lot of Gen Y members move back home after college and stay there for years, and that can be because housing is expensive and they can't find a high enough paying job to move out on their own. It can also be because their parents, the baby boomers, they can be thought of as sort of enabling. You know, they allow their kids to come back home, maybe even continue to cook for them or do their laundry instead of forcing them out on their own. And luckily, there are some positive things about us. One positive stereotype is that Gen Y is probably the most tech-savvy generation around. You know, they grew up using the internet and grew up with computers in the classroom. They started texting and using smartphones at a young age instead of having to learn these things later in life. So technology is something that's very natural and comfortable for them. They're also the generation that's probably the most ethnically and racially diverse. Also probably the most socially tolerant generation, the most accepting of and open to different ideas and backgrounds that they come across when they, say, read the news or meet new people. Known to be very interested in volunteering their time. A big trend for Gen Y members is donating their time to charities while in high school or college, whether that's through organizing a food drive or giving blood. And also, judging from the last few presidential elections, they're a pretty politically active group, and they're interested in learning about political issues and getting involved with political campaigns. A major mindset difference between Gen Y and generations before them is that instead of starting a career and getting married right after college, they're delaying these steps until they feel like the time is right and until they've explored all of their options. And they do that because they're afraid that by doing these things too soon, that might lead to a divorce or an unsatisfying career. So instead, they're waiting for the right situation and taking their time with these major steps.